Hello.
Going to start recording, and yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Well, first of all, welcome to our Earth Day, the EcoAthletes Earth Day community chat / celebration. I'm Lou Blaustein, the founder of EcoAthletes. We launched a year ago-ish, actually a little more than a year ago, with the mission to inspire and coach athletes to lead climate action. That's the mission statement, but I like to say it this way also. We are looking to find and deploy the Megan Rapinoe's, Colin Kaepernick's, Muhammad Ali's, Billie Jean King's of climate change, because we don't have the time not to do so. And sorry for the double negative there. So we are really thrilled to welcome our EcoAthletes champions, the athletes who have been with us pretty much for the past year, advancing our mission, and to athletes, climate curious athletes, climate active athletes from all over the world who are interested in finding out more about what we do. And so we welcome you to our event, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a community chat. You see, every 2 months or so since we launched, we have had these chats with our champions, athletes who endorse our mission, share our social, and our climate comeback hashtag. So we invite everybody here to use that hashtag climate comeback when they're on social media posting about climate. And so we have the chats, and it's a chance for the athletes to share ideas, discuss relevant topics, and build a community of climate active athletes. And so today we have a special event. We have 2 guest speakers, but in the tradition of the community chat, we always start with an icebreaker. What's your favorite movie? What's the weirdest thing you did during COVID? Today's community chat is something we've asked our champions to do for over the next year, which is to make a climate action commitment and to make good on it. And so I'm going to start with, well, my own climate commitment. And for all of you in the audience, please share in the chat any climate commitments that you would like to make. So mine is to ride my bike or walk to do any local errands within 2 miles. And I feel like this is going to reduce carbon emissions and also get me to some more exercise, which I can definitely use. So I am going to make good on this, even when it's not such great weather. We have a couple of our champions who also are going to share their commitments. And is Zoe Morse on the webinar?
Hi, I'm here.
Zoe Morse of the Chicago Red Stars of the National Women's Soccer League, or NWSL. Good to see you, Zoe. What's your commitment?
You too. So my commitment that I made for this year is to eat more local and seasonally. I think for the past year or so, I've really focused on trying to eat more plant-based, which is a lot of what's preached in the climate space. And it's obviously an incredible endeavor to do that. But then I was realizing that I was getting all my produce from places around the world, and it was being shipped all the way here to Chicago. So I'm just really trying to focus on reducing my food miles, so reducing the carbon emissions of my diet. And then the result of that will also be supporting local farmers, supporting local businesses, and just feeling more connected to the environment around me, which I'm excited to do.
And I'm sure the Chicago
Oh no, I think Lou paused. Can everybody hear me? I see some other people moving. Hopefully, Zoe, you're nodding along. Looks like Michael's climate action commitment is to not throw anything in the trash, basically, anything usable, which everything is usable probably. Let's shift over. Ridian, I know you're down in Australia. Would you be able to share your climate action commitment?
Yep, g'day from down under. Bit of a late night for me here, but I thought it was worth staying up for. Well, I think I'd actually put my climate action commitment as getting solar panels installed on the house. In Victoria in Australia, where I live, we get a lot of our electricity still from really polluting brown coal. So having solar panels installed just means that I'm using less electricity generated from brown coal and more electricity generated from the sun. So that's I actually got that installed yesterday for Earth Day, so I'm going to have to I think pick a new thing to move on for the next 12 months. Maybe changing my gas stove to something like an induction hob, I think, just to reduce my fossil fuel use even more. So that's something sort of concrete and actionable and measurable. So I thought that was something that would be good to commit to.
Awesome, I love it. Looks like lots of people have chats that they're putting in their commitments. Luke, would you mind sharing yours since you shared in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone from Czech Republic, but I am an Aussie. Yeah, so I'm gonna shift the diet more towards plants-based, which I think individually is said to be one of the biggest impacts I can have, as well as I have my wife and my young daughter, and yeah, it'll be hopefully win-win. So you'll be more healthy, as well as aiming for that 8 a week target. Becoming more flexitarian, I think, is the gradual step for us.
That's awesome. I think Lou is back on now.
Yes, technical difficulties hopefully resolved thanks to the miracle of connecting through your phone. How about would anyone else like to share a chat? It looks like we have Marcus Daniel, who is from New Zealand, although I have a feeling you're in Europe right now, preparing for a clay court tournament, or maybe even in one that's taking place right now. Marcus, one of the top men's doubles players in the world.
Hey guys, yeah, in Barcelona right now. Actually just set up base here, so hoping to be based out of here until tennis is finished for me, which hopefully is a few years yet. And yeah, I'm staying committed to eating no meat for the moment. I think that's actually going to be a lifelong thing for me. It feels right, and the further I go with it, the easier I find it to be. And then the other side of it for me is through tennis, I have to travel all over the world and have to fly almost every week, and that sucks for the environment. So just trying to use the most cost-effective climate change organizations to at least balance out my air travel and hopefully weigh the scales as much as I can on the other side. So yeah, those are sort of my two climate commitments for the year.
Yeah, and Marcus alluded to effective nonprofits being part of that. Or he started a nonprofit recently called High Impact Athletes. Would you want to just share a quick note about that?
Sure. Yeah. So it's based on the ideals of effective altruism, which I guess boils down to trying to do the most good with whatever resources you have at hand, whether that be money or your time or your platform. You know, especially as athletes, I think one of the things that we have as a tool or as a lever is a platform. We do have people following us. So just trying to find the most cost-effective and the most impactful organizations in the world and lending our support to them. And High Impact Athletes is, I guess, a platform and a portal first to learn about what the most cost-effective or impactful and evidence-based organizations are in the spaces of extreme poverty, climate change, and farmed animal welfare, which I think also has a real environmental bent. And then facilitating donations through to those organizations that are already doing such incredible stuff with each dollar donated. So what I was saying before, where I'm trying to offset my air travel specifically, there's an organization called the Clean Air Task Force, which actually I think ties in quite nicely with EcoAthletes, because a lot of their work is based on trying to change policy or trying to lobby government. And the track record that they have of turning donation dollars into CO2 equivalent eliminated is just phenomenal. So those sorts of organizations are the things that you can find on HIA. And like Lou, trying to create a community of athletes who are really invested in doing the most good possible and yeah, help each other out with giving. So yeah, thanks Lou for the opportunity to talk about it a little bit.
Hey, I think it's a much needed and a terrific initiative that you've started, and good luck in Barcelona and on the clay court season. Would anyone else like to share? I see Brent Suter who is with the Milwaukee with the Milwaukee Brewers, the hot Milwaukee Brewers. A pitcher for the Brewers and also a member of our advisory board. And Brent, how about yourself?
Yeah, similarly to the other guys and girls who have spoken, I'm going to try to make sure at least one day of the week is meatless, trying to go meatless Mondays and just avoid any red meat in general. So basically only eating chicken and turkey right now as my meat sources, and trying to eat less and less of those, and then obviously eliminate those on Mondays, and trying to offset the travel as well. Help kind of found a program called Sidelining Carbon last year, where we're trying to get sports teams to commit to offsetting their airline and bus travel through Cool Effects. So trying to see how that goes. But yeah, so basically the diet is my main commitment, meatless Mondays. We can do it. We can do it.
Awesome. And Brent, I mean, Brent has gone the extra mile on not only on Meatless Mondays, but on advocating for carbon pricing, from talking about it, talking about climate in interviews, in very solutions oriented ways. And one of the things that if I were to add another commitment, I would add is that to talk about climate change. It can be uncomfortable. It can be like either it's a negative, it can be seen as this heavy topic. People don't want to talk about it, but we need to engage people to care about the issue, to make changes, and to get involved with groups that are trying to make changes at the macro level. And by doing so, you can show folks that there are ways that we can solve this problem. And athletes that's why we have the hashtag climate comeback. We are behind in the climate game. We need a massive comeback or comebacks. And who better to fashion comebacks than athletes? And so I will.
Lou, I think there was one more. I think David was able to share his
Yes, you
climate
go
action
ahead.
commitment before we keep going here.
Yep. Hello.
Hey guys,
Hey,
how are we
David.
all doing? Hi Kristen, hey Lou, lovely to be part of this. Thank you so much for the invite, especially as I'm not a champion of sorts. I'm not an athlete, but it's great to be part of this community. And a bit like Marcus said earlier on, it's great to bring like-minded people together, and that's how you make an impact. So yeah, my commitment is to be vegan as much as possible. I'd say I'm vegan probably 95% of the time. I've been doing it bit by bit, but I'm almost kind of fully there. And I think what I've enjoyed about that is really discovering lots of new tastes and textures, and I don't know, yeah, really feeling like I'm learning exactly about what I eat and what's going into my body, which I guess is even more important for an athlete. And yeah, most of my work around climate action and the climate comeback is to create content, because that's what I do. For those who don't know, I'm a presenter on Sky Sports News, which is a 24-hour sports news channel in the UK. And I write a lot as well, and I do podcasting and all sorts of things. And I think this is the real power here, and especially with the platforms and the audiences that you guys have, and the one that I have at Sky, to really get the message out and to make sure that people understand, what it is that they can do, and the little steps that they can take, and be positive about it, be upbeat, and see what impact we can make.
Terrific. Thank you, David. And thank you for your work over on the other side of the pond at Sky Sports News. And now we are excited and thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker for today's chat and Earth Day celebration. And that is Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, who is the chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy, climate scientist at Texas Tech University, and for my money, the best and most powerful climate communicator I have ever heard. I saw her in An Inconvenient Truth, and then saw her in person speak at a Citizens Climate Lobby event back in 2014. And I went up to her and I introduced myself and I said, I'm writing this blog about green and sports, and could I interview you? And first she had to figure out what I was talking about, and then she said yes. And since then we've been back and forth. And when we launched EcoAthletes, Katharine was gracious enough to become a supporter, and then accepted our invitation to talk today. So Katharine, welcome to our Earth Day community chat. You're speaking to athletes from all over the world, from a plethora of sports. And so now I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Lou. So I am from Canada. I live in Texas, and the reason why I care about climate change is because of who I am. And that's what I've discovered, is that often people feel like, oh, I have to be a certain type of person to care about climate change. But the reality is, whatever is already at the top of our priority list today, those are the reasons why we care about climate change. And if we care about any aspect of sport, that is right up there at the top. So as you probably know, as the planet gets warmer, our summer heat increases, our winters get shorter and less predictable. We see more heavy rain events, hurricanes are stronger, droughts are longer, and all of this is affecting outdoor sports. So I'm from Canada. I grew up cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, snowshoeing, ice skating, figure skating. I absolutely love the snow. I love winter camping. I have no problem at all with that. And we know that already our seasons are getting shorter. So, I'm from Toronto, and we've had some winters already with no snow, which is kind of insane when you think about it. Nowadays, I live in West Texas, and our closest ski areas are in New Mexico. They're absolutely fantastic. But a couple of years ago, we had a winter that was so hot and so dry that none of them were able to open completely. And even this year, the season was truncated. And often what's happening with a lot of ski resorts is they're not getting the Christmas season. And the Christmas season is when they make most of their money, and they're not being able to get reasonable snow cover in time for Christmas and New Year's. My friend Jenny Vanos ran track for the junior team for Canada, and she became a biometeorologist. So she studies the effect of heat and air pollution on the human body. She has been asked to test the marathon route in Tokyo because they're really afraid that people are gonna overheat. So she had to alter the route to make sure that there was enough trees and shade, and also talk about how many cooling stations they would have and things like that, to make sure that people would be safe as they did that. Outdoor ice hockey is a big thing across Canada and across the northeast US and across the Midwest. I mean, I grew up where we and everybody I knew would actually get out the hose as soon as it got cold enough and make rinks in our backyards. And I grew up skating outdoors. I never even skated indoors until I started doing figure skating, because that's just what everybody does. Well, now the outdoor ice rink season is getting shorter and shorter. Half the time, they are literally just pools of water sitting there. One of my colleagues, a guy called Gabe Vecchi, is a hurricane researcher. In fact, he's one of the top hurricane researchers in the world. And he is at Princeton University. And he is very worried about climate change, as most of us are. But he sort of felt like a lot of scientists that, I'm surrounded by a bubble of people who think the same as me. So what am I going to do about this other than just do my science? But he is also an ice hockey fanatic, and he plays with the local team, and they compete around the region. And he realized, listening to the guys on the team talk, that most of them were kind of skeptical about climate change. They didn't think it mattered. They thought it was a liberal issue, nothing to do with them. But then the very next breath, they'd been complaining about how they couldn't play outside, or how they went to play at this team and they had like a shaded outdoor rink, but it was just a pile of water. They couldn't even play a decent game. And so he put two and two together, and he realized that if he started actually tracking how many days they've been able to play outside and when was the last time they could have a game on this famous pond that people have been playing on for 100 years, he could actually have a conversation with people over something that mattered to them that was directly being affected by climate change. So we see already that it's affecting baseball. The Texas Rangers built a brand new stadium 25 years ago in Irving, and they had to build another stadium just a couple of years ago to put a roof on it to air condition it, because it was too hot to play in their stadium that had not reached the end of its lifetime. We know that people are changing when kids practice for football. They're making it earlier and earlier in the morning because the kids were getting heat exhaustion in the summer. We know that outdoor tennis matches have been affected. We know that climate change is already here and now. And we know that the best way to talk about it is not by talking about polar bears in Antarctica. It's by starting the conversation with something that we share and something that we agree with people on. And what's, more personal than something that we're passionate about, that we love doing, that the other person or people also love doing too? We can start a conversation with that shared basis, and then connect the dots to why climate change matters, and then offer practical solutions that people can engage in terms of, first of all, talking about it, being an advocate, using our voice. Second of all, encouraging others to get on board. Third of all, making changes in our personal life and talking about those. And fourth, working within our spheres of influence, our social groups, our organizations, our place of work or school or worship, wherever it is that we are, we're part of a greater system where we can use our voice to advocate for change within that framework. And I feel like there's so many great examples of that, but I've already given you a few stories, and now I'd be happy to take your questions or thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Awesome. We just had one come in from on the chat. Katharine, hi. I'm Kristen. Hi, everybody. So I was just going to share Michael's question, which is, he's a longtime hockey player, and he's wondering how professional organizations like the Seattle Kraken can, consider reusing rainwater to resurface the ice, for example, and make the systems a little more circular.
Mhm. That's a great idea. And I can give you a generic answer for how can I get any organization to do any solution? And the answer is often people want to be part of the solution. Nobody wants to be part of the problem, but we feel sort of frozen, like there's nothing that we can do. So when you approach a discussion from the perspective of, I'm sure that you care about these issues and you would be excited to do something about it, rather than approaching them like waving a judgy finger saying, you horrible person, I can't believe you're using tap water to do this. When you approach from a perspective of mutual values, that helps. And then second of all, saying, hey, there's this amazing thing. Did you know that Seattle was doing this? They are, and do your homework. How much did it cost to do the rainwater collection? How much did the equipment cost? How much are they saving on their water bill? How have they used that in their marketing so that people know they're more sustainable, which helps with their people's perspective on them? Do your homework, get a list of the benefits, and go in there with a, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do this too? Here's how much it costs up front. Here's how much it saves us in the long run. Is this something that you might be able to fit in the budget? If not, how could we do it? I'm here to help. So taking that sort of positive attitude and assuming that they also want to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, that's a big way I feel like we can get people on board. It's not a magic wand. I mean, it's not like if you say the magic words, everybody will immediately say yes, but it's appealing to people's better side rather than judging them. Too often we go in and we judge people. And I don't know about you, but when I get judged, the last thing I want to do is work with that person. I just want to get as far away from them as I can. So going in with the perspective of, you're great, you want to do the right thing. I'm sure that you're concerned about this too. And taking that approach really goes a long way.
Well, hold on one second. I just had to get the phone. Anyway, another question.
And Luke, you're right. You did see me on with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've been on with him 2 different times.
Katharine, can I ask a question? I was going to write it, but I'm not quite sure exactly how to word it. I'm curious what you think about putting energy towards trying to sway the people in your immediate community versus putting energy towards trying to sway your local council or your government, or I guess putting energy towards top down versus bottom up. Where do you land on that?
Honestly, I think that they're both incredibly valuable. So first of all, social science has showed that the number 2 most effective messengers to talk to people about climate risks and climate solutions are scientists. And the number 1 most effective messenger is somebody you know.
Okay.
So someone in your social circle, somebody whose values you share, who you feel like you trust, that is the number 1 most effective messenger to speak to people we know. Again, those could be our friends, they could be people we know from work, they could be our neighbors, they could be people we knew from school. We are the most effective person to talk to them there. But you're right, at the same time, we live in a democratic society, and that means that our leaders need to hear from us. And it really is part of our responsibility as citizens to say, and with politicians too, so often people go in very judgmentally to politicians, telling them everything they've done wrong. But if we can go into a politician and I do my best, and if I can't do this, I don't think I'm the right person to talk to them. I do my best to find something that I can sincerely congratulate them and honor them for. So I start with something, and this is particularly important for elected officials because they just get bashed all the time. I start with thanking them for something, or acknowledging something, or saying, wow, I just love the way you do blank, or I really appreciate your focus on blah, blah, blah. And then connect the dots. Because you're such a passionate advocate for whatever it is, I know that you will be concerned about blah, blah, blah. Right? So no judgment there. You'd be like, oh, you're such a wonderful person. Obviously you're concerned about this. And then bring in a solution that would be viable for them. So you're not just throwing a problem on their lap, but you're like, I know it's really difficult. You have a lot of demands on your time and your money, but have you considered? And then if you have a powerful example of someone in a similar condition, like a similar state or council person or a similar town or at the national level, have you considered? And then offer them a solution that they could look into more that would be plausible for who they are. I've actually been doing a really deep dive into what changes society. And I'm really excited because I just finished writing this book. It's called, I don't know if you can see, it's called Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World. And I have a whole section on everything I talked about with sports and how climate change is affecting sports. But what I did was I read a ton of social science studies, journal articles, books, and had conversations with people whose area of expertise is changing people's minds, everybody from like advertising to persuasion. And I looked at history, slavery, women's rights, women's vote, civil rights. And what really fascinated me was that when change has happened in the past, it wasn't because a president, a prime minister, some major figure decided that the world had to be different. It was because ordinary people decided the world had to be different. And they started to talk about it. And they started to group together with like-minded people. And then they started to group together with other groups of like-minded people. And what happened is what scientists call social norms changed. I mean, social norms 200 years ago used to be that it was perfectly acceptable to literally own another human being. That was literally a social norm 200 years ago. Just over 100 years ago, it was literally a social norm to believe that women's brains were smaller than a man's and would overheat if they were stimulated with education, and that women were emotionally incapable of voting. I mean, that was a social norm. 300 years ago, it was a social norm to take your chamber pot and throw it out the window, and who cares if it hits your neighbor? So we've had tremendous change, and those changes have not happened because somebody in charge decided they should change. It happened because individual people decided to change and had conversations with everybody they knew, and they agreed, and they had conversations with everyone they knew. So isn't that crazy? It just emphasizes the importance of the individual in changing our world.
Thank you. Yeah, fascinating. That's awesome. So unless you're close friends with the climate minister, then speaking with your personal circle is as good as you can do.
Yeah, well, it is. But at the same time, you are a citizen. So, here's a really interesting statistic, and this is just true for the US. 0.1% of elected officials in the US are federal. 0.1%. So 99.9% of them are not federal. So that means they're not a congressperson, they're not a representative, which means that if you want to meet with them, chances are they're available. Mm-hmm. So often people go for the Congress people or the senators, and you can never get to talk to them personally unless you try for like 2 years, and then sometimes you can. But if you could just talk to your local council person, the person who represents your city or your region, often you can get in to talk to them, and you might find that you have somebody in common, like they know somebody who you know, and so you could sort of add them to your circle, if that makes sense.
And that's and that's kind of the ethos of Citizens Climate Lobby, a group that I volunteered with and that Katharine has been very involved with over a number of years, which is very citizen-oriented, grassroots, ask questions, show appreciation, be respectful, try and find ways to yes. And so we have another question for you. And this is from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Yannick. Katharine, he says that he heard you on sustainability agenda and compliments you for that, and then asked the question, what kind of policies and procedures do you believe sports organizations can implement within leagues, tours, etc.?
That's a great question. So I think that first of all, the best place to start is to look around and see what's already been done. I'm a big fan of not starting with a blank page. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to write, I just love to have something like sort of already there, and then I can sort of work with it. And the final product might not resemble what I started with at all, but I just like having something there. So rather than starting with a blank page, I would do a bit of research. I would call around, I would do some Googling, I would ask some people to find out what have other people done, because there definitely are quite a few sports teams who are already making changes. Like, for example, you can measure the carbon footprint of the team. How do the activities that you do, how do they use energy? Is there possibly a different way to get that energy? So let me just give you a very concrete example. In Canada, a lot of our hockey teams, the farm teams, travel around by bus. So it turns out that there are quite a few organizations. There's one called REG in Ames, Iowa, that take waste cooking oil, waste agricultural products, garbage essentially, and they turn it into diesel fuel that you can put into a regular bus. And it's carbon neutral because when that plant grew, it took the carbon out of the atmosphere, they processed it, and then you burn it and it puts the same carbon back up. So it's not carbon from underground and fossil fuels, it's carbon that was just taken out last year. So that's something really interesting, for example, that people could do if they had to bus around. Other organizations that might have to fly because that's what the schedule requires, they could look at using airlines like United Airlines that's already experimenting with biofuel, especially from the LA airport. They've been flying for 5 years on biofuel out of the LA airport. You could also look at purchasing offsets. So offsets are where you take the money and you give it to an organization that is investing in something that pulls carbon out of the atmosphere. And you can calculate exactly how much carbon you produce, and you can pull that much amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. And there's a lot of good organizations that do that. It's not a substitute for doing everything we can. In fact, the organization I use, it's one called Climate Stewards. Their motto is reduce everything you can first, and then offset the rest after you're done. And then in terms of your own facility, where does your facility get its energy from? Or if you rent or share a facility, could you talk to the people who manage the facility, see if they could invest in clean energy? How about reusing the water, like Michael talked about, collecting rainwater in Seattle? I'm sure they have a lot of it. And using that to resurface the ice. How do you heat and cool the building? How efficient is it? It turns out that we waste 67% of the energy that we produce in North America. And through efficiency alone, we could cut our carbon emissions 50%. And then what about the food that we sell? Beef has a much higher carbon footprint than any other food. And beef, and then to a second extent pork, but then chicken and fish has very minimal, and plants have hardly anything. So could we think about redoing the food that we offer if that's something that's under our control? So there's this whole variety of things. And I would just sort of go on like a fishing expedition, make a whole giant list of what all the different teams are doing. And especially the teams in Europe are often quite a bit ahead of the ones in North America. See what they're doing and see what would be viable for your situation, depending on, how much decision-making power you have in your scheduling, in your facility, and in your operations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was awesome. Just as a follow-up question, someone in the chat asked about what your feelings are in terms of tree planting as one of those offset solutions in terms of impact as compared to some of the others.
Yeah, so investing in ecosystems is a huge way that we can help take up carbon, because did you know in the ecosystems of the world, which include, forests, jungle, grassland, brush, we've got 100 times more carbon in those ecosystems that we humans have produced since the beginning of the industrial era. I mean, that's how much carbon there is in ecosystems. So restoring degraded ecosystems is really important. Protecting mature ecosystems from being cut down is very important. And then replanting carefully replanting ecosystems that have been turned into agricultural land, and turning them back into ecosystems by planting trees, and by planting enough of a variety of trees, and by making sure that those trees will be preserved. You're not just planting them and somebody's going to cut them down in 5 more years. When it's done carefully, it can be a big part of the solution.
Fantastic. Katharine, we have a question now from Perth, Australia. Amy Steele, who is an EcoAthletes champion and a former netball player, asked this. Just imagine we live in a world where all major sports leagues and events like the Olympics, the NBA, et cetera, were all compelled to be carbon neutral. Let's assume, she writes, that it is from the people, from fans and from athletes that drive it. So assuming that we've already procured all stadium electricity from renewables and that the remainder needs to be offset, would you try to get all leagues to collaborate into a single fund, or do you think it's better to tackle it league by league and alone?
I think that in addition to going with renewable energy, you can do a lot of other things. You can look at your travel and your transportation. You can look at your food. Did you know that in rich countries, we throw out over 40% of the food we produce? And when food decays, it produces heat trapping gases too, just like burning fossil fuels. And in fact, if food waste were its own country, it would be the 4th biggest emitter of heat trapping gases in the world. I mean, that's insane. And all of that food that we waste is enough to feed everybody who's going hungry. So don't just stop at renewable energy. Look at your water, look at your food, look at your transportation. But then in terms of the offsets, that's a great question. There's a lot of different organizations that do offsets in different ways. So for example, the one that I work with myself, I chose it because I know the people who do it. And so I know they're super careful with their accounting and they're not trying to, cut any numbers. In fact, they're so careful that they actually double their numbers. So they make you pay for double the amount of carbon just to be absolutely sure that that's what you're getting. They work with poor communities to restore ecosystems and to put in things like solar stoves in poor communities. There's other organizations like, I think it's called Native Power or Native Energy, that work with putting in solar energy on Native American reservations. There's others that work with low-income communities to retrofit their homes to be much more energy efficient so they could cut their energy bills in half. And then, of course, there's some offset programs that restore ecosystems, that plant trees. I'm with the Nature Conservancy now, and they do a lot of what they call nature-based solutions, working with big corporations. So I wouldn't say there's just one way to do it. I would say there's so many different ways to do it. And it makes sense just for ease of use to have like a couple of standard ones. So like if a new team or a new league is trying to join, they don't have to do all the research from starting from zero. You can just be like, look here, we already did the research and here's 3 great options you pick. So that sort of makes sense, but I would hate to say this is the only one that you should use because there's so many good ones.
And I also, I look forward to the EcoAthletes community chat where Katharine can come back and we are living in the world that Amy imagined, and then we can really go to town. Now we have time for just 2 more questions, and thank you everybody for the great questions. First, this is from Silas. How do you recommend athletes become climate advocates, even in sports that are openly endorsed by huge polluters? Think European soccer with Gazprom, the Emirates Airlines, etc. How do they overcome potentially protesting their own employers?
That is a really tough one. I'm so glad you asked that, Silas. I think, first of all, having conversations behind the scenes with the team and with the league is going to be really important, rather than going out publicly, having those conversations privately so that people don't feel like they're kind of set back on their heels and attacked and taken aback. Talking about, hey, I understand we need sponsors. I completely agree. I appreciate those sponsors. They provide so much for us. But we have this issue where we will not have organized sport if we do not fix climate change. So what can we do? And sort of, together, what can we do to reconsider how we fund our league in a way that does not actively contribute to this problem and helps to fix it? Are there new sponsors we could look for? Could we speak to our sponsors to ask them to be one of the pioneers in their industry in terms of climate action? And sometimes you might just be met with a stone wall, and that's the case where it has to go more public if they're not willing to have a conversation behind closed doors. But I would always take that approach first of saying, again, expressing gratitude and acknowledging the challenge, saying that we're all in this together and how can we do things differently in the future, because we're all on the same page. We want this to be a league in 20 years. We want it to exist in 30 years. We don't want it to disappear because of all of the disasters hitting the earth and the economy going down the tubes because of climate change. We all want the same thing, so how can we work together to get it? And I put 2 links in the chat there. I have a TED Talk, and then I love Brent's question. Brent said, what gives you hope? And you know what? That's the #1 question I have gotten everywhere I've spoken for the last 4 years. And actually, that is why I wrote the book. I put a link to the book in the chat. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order it already. And that's why I wrote the book, literally, is because people kept asking me, what gives you hope? So in the book, I talk about the problem. I talk about why we would care. I talk about how it relates to sports. But then the very last chapter of the book is called Hope and Courage. And I love the quote I start off with. It's from 2 of my colleagues who edited a great book called All We Can Save that you can already buy. It's a collection of women's voices on climate. And they said this, they said, it's a magnificent thing to be alive at a moment that matters so much.
Boom. Katharine, what a great, like, that's the mic drop moment right there. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna give a hand for on behalf of everybody. This was such a rich experience. We really appreciate it. We'll be in touch, and we'll be talking on our podcast in a couple months about your book.
That's fantastic. So if anybody wants more, and if you have any other questions, follow me on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, sort of LinkedIn. I'm still not quite sure what to do with LinkedIn, but I'm there. And Twitter's probably the best place if you have a super short question. Just send me a question there and I'd be happy to get back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Katharine, and have a great rest of your Earth Day. I'm sure it's going to be busy.
It is, but this was a fantastic start. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right. And thank you, everybody, again, for your great questions. Now we are going to pivot over to actually the fellow who asked the question that Katharine dealt with at the very end, who is Brent Suter. He is a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers. He was actually the first athlete that I called when I started EcoAthletes to see if he would be interested. And he jumped on right away, not only as a champion, he's also a member of our advisory board. And he gives us such great perspective from an active athlete who is trying to advance climate while he's also trying to win a World Series. So I'm going to hand it over to Brent to share his thoughts with us for a bit. Brent, take it away.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, really appreciate it. And thank you to Dr. Hayhoe. That's incredible. She was on An Inconvenient Truth. That was kind of like the big moment for me coming to, have climate issues on my heart. So she's awesome. I just wanted to talk a little bit about reaching kind of the other side of the spectrum in terms of, our fellow teammates or fellow people in our spheres that don't really see this as a problem or kind of have that pushback. And the big message I want to get across today is just consistent action goes a long way. If you are dedicated to, your diet or the actions that you want to show people that, hey, I care about the climate. If you use reusable bottles and Tupperware instead of using all the single-use stuff, if you do the energy efficient thermostats, all that stuff, like the consistent action gets people curious. So for instance, when I got called up to the big leagues back a couple years ago, I was using this like reusable Tupperware thing in AAA. And I was like, hey, I'm going up to the big leagues. Kind of be weird if I use that. I think I'm going to get crushed by the guys. And everyone was like, no, listen, you gotta be you, keep doing that. And maybe you'll change some minds up there. So went up there, used the reusable Tupperware, and it got a lot of people curious, like, what are you doing that for? And it actually sparked a bunch of good conversations about climate change. And so kind of going outside your comfort zone, the message is going outside your comfort zone and being dedicated to these weird actions, the actions that other people might see as weird, but that you see as helping the system can go a long way in sparking conversations, just like Dr. Hayhoe said. When we start talking about this, and how Lou said, when we start talking about these issues and we kind of get away from that stigma of the hopelessness and start talking about the things that give us hope and the actions that we can do individually and the policies that we can advocate for, it goes a long way. And it's just like anything else, when you show that action, it means more coming from you. They see that everyday action and they start respecting it more and more. And then soon enough, you have minds change. And I've not trying to brag or anything, but I think a lot of teammates have kind of changed their mind on climate change just because of this Tupperware, or just like because of weird actions, because of things I don't eat, things I do eat, all that stuff. So, and now they're on board, they're joining organizations, they're looking to do messaging for the environment. So I think a little bit of consistency and consistent action goes a long way. And I also want to talk about conversations and the tone we have in conversations. It's definitely, you need to work in some type of alarming facts into your conversations. Like, hey, we're running, like, by 2050, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. Like, you can drop some alarming facts on people to kind of get their attention. But I found that if you drive too many hopeless facts home or too many crazy facts home to people that are kind of skeptical, you might lose them. So just trying to strike that balance of, hey, here's what's going on, here's the problems, but look at what we're doing, look at what can be done, look at what gives us hope for the future. And I think just finding that balance and not going too far. And I've done it many, many times, and I've lost some people because I just start going way down the rabbit hole of, bad facts or like depressing facts. So if you can strike that balance between, hey, here's what's going on, here are the problems, but here's some things that are solutions, here's how we can help, here's what you can do individually to help, I think that balance goes a long way. But yeah, I just really want to thank everyone for joining the call. Again, thank you, Dr. Hayhoe, for an incredible talk. She's awesome. And if there's any questions, you can chat or shout them out in here. But otherwise, I'll just hand it back off to Lou and say, Happy Earth Day 2021.
Happy Earth Day 2021. I have a question for you, Brent.
Yep.
I think it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you started out an initiative called Strike Out Waste. Maybe you could share with the group what that was and how that kind of how that resonated with the Brewers.
Yeah. So it was a campaign, I think 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, where I was encouraging teammates, fans, other people in the organization to use reusable water bottles rather than single-use water bottles. We were just going through a ton of plastic water bottles in spring, and it was making me sick, quite honestly. So tried to get a little bit more public messaging in there, got a lot of sponsorships and a lot of bottles sent in. I think we sent out over 200, 300 reusable bottles to teammates, coaches, and fans and all that. And then had people tag, hashtag Strike Out Waste with their reusable bottles, and it became a pretty cool movement. It had lost a little steam once the season started, just because routines changed, and I was back in Arizona rehabbing, so I couldn't press on everybody to keep the reusable bottles. But we still saved a lot of plastic water bottle waste. But I think the bigger thing it did was it got SC Johnson and some other corporations really interested in the Brewers reusable or sustainability efforts, and now there's a really good partnership going with SC Johnson and the Brewers for recycling, Save the Oceans campaign, donating money for beach cleanups, and some really good messaging and educational work they're doing. So the Brewers are now seen as kind of this team that is helping with sustainability efforts. So I think that was biggest thing that came from Strike Out Waste. We still saved a lot of plastic, but there's still a lot of waste going on in the dugout.
I've seen those post-game shots where they interview the star of the game, and there's the dugout, and there's some plastic still. But that just means you have a lot of opportunity to improve. We have a question, and this is really good for a perfect question for Brent. Brent, along with several other of our EcoAthletes champions, contributed to a plant-based recipe book that we offered during the holidays as part of our fall fundraiser. And by the way, Brent's plant-based stew is awesome. And so, Brent, question is, what is your favorite meal during Meatless Mondays?
So that's a good question. I think cauliflower crust veggie pizza is incredible. I don't wherever you can find, for some reason, cauliflower crust, it's just the best. And vegan cheese too. I'll eat some regular cheese, but if the restaurant or wherever offers vegan cheese, I'm hopping on it. And for Meatless Mondays, so yeah, veggie pizza with cauliflower crust, best.
Fantastic. And it also, as it's approaching lunchtime here in the Northeast, that really sounds good. So Brent, thanks so much. Thank you for everything you're doing for EcoAthletes. Good luck to the Brewers. You guys are on in a good stretch, and keep the spin rate good, and we'll be talking soon. All right.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're gonna make a shift over to Kristen Fulmer, our EcoAthletes strategic advisor, who has done so much to make this organization shine over the last year or so. And so she's going to share with us a bit about how EcoAthletes works to help athletes become true climate EcoAthletes champions, to maximize your climate brands. So Kristen?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I don't know about everyone else, but I am feeling very inspired after the conversation just today and seeing all of the momentum in the larger green sports movement that we've seen today. Lots of really great announcements. Keep following on social media. So we realized that, we've had a really great conversation, and you might have heard the name EcoAthletes, and we've heard from a lot of our EcoAthlete champions who are familiar with our community chats, which is what this is. But we realized that there's also a lot of newer athletes that we're welcoming to the conversation. And we thought we might take a minute just to kind of explain what EcoAthletes is about and share a little bit more with you of how we work with athletes directly. So hopefully you can see my screen here. I'm just sharing a graphic that really shows our resource hub for how we support kind of climate curious athletes. Maybe you're not sure, but you're thinking about how you want to engage on topics like sustainability and climate, and how we provide resources and through a variety of different capacities to become climate active leaders, like Lou said. So I'll just kind of read the graphic here from left to right and explain kind of the 5 main pillars of what we do. So the first one, which isn't for everybody, is just making connections to climate active brands. So we know that some athletes are sponsored. We talked about it earlier already, or have relationships with specific brands. But we've heard from a few of our champions that they love recommendations and connections to brands that can align to their values. And be ambassadors for products and organizations that they feel aligned to and can help grow that mission. So EcoAthletes can make those connections to climate active brands. On social media, you'll be receiving an email after this as an example. We try to make sharing topics around climate action really easy on social media, trying to offer kind of turnkey solutions so you can copy and paste, show images, and like Lou said, grow your kind of personal brand in terms of being a climate active athlete. And that graphic that we showed at the very beginning with Lou's climate action commitment is just another example. We are making those for the EcoAthletes champions, and are just really excited to share everybody's story. Community is all of us here today. We do community chats and get everybody speaking together. And it's really just about supporting each other no matter what sport you play, but being together and sharing our shared experiences and sometimes challenges with being climate active athletes. Career growth is another opportunity that athletes can engage us in, which is mentoring, even connections to our advisory board members who are really established advocates in sustainability in a lot of different ways. But we offer support, kind of mentorship, or even connections directly to job opportunities if we see a good connection. The last element is thought leadership. So we all the time are asked, what athlete would be great to speak on this? And so we try to make those connections between outside media sources, conferences, panels, directly to athletes that can help share their story and grow this movement together. So just wrapping up, this is the resource hub specifically on how we gauge athletes, and then kind of zooming out a little bit, you see how brands and organizations and also foundations can kind of support this work. And that's who we rely on really to help us grow this hub and grow our champions network. Just to wrap up here, we've just given a refresh to our website. You might recognize the guy on the front of the website right now. He just spoke to you a little bit ago, but please take a look. I think Silas put the URL in the chat there, so you can see this updated website, click around. On that website, you have the chance, if you're not already an EcoAthletes champion, to join our community. There's a link there, and I think Silas will drop the link in the chat for how you can sign up to become an EcoAthletes champion if you're interested. We'd love to have you join in whatever capacity you can and be a member of our community. Last thing is, if you're not so sure about joining right now, feel free to just follow us on social media at EcoAthletes Team. Please reach out, share more about your climate action journey, including what you're doing for Earth Day today. Please tag us. We'd love to share and see what you're up to. And last but not least, if you post climate action, climate comeback, hashtag climate comeback today, you will be entered to win 2 different prizes. One is a gift card to a plant-based meal delivery, and one is a signed copy of Michael Mann's book called The New Climate War, which is a New York Times bestseller. And he's one of our advisory board members. So we're really thankful that he's able to offer that as one of the prizes. So I know we've hit time. I wanted to thank all of you for joining. Please reach out with any questions. Again, here's how you can follow us and post hashtag climate comeback. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Brent for sharing your story. Thanks to Katharine for sharing hers, and thanks to all of you for sharing your climate action commitments. We'll see you soon. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. Really appreciate your attendance and your questions and your insights.
Oh, Bridget asked if we have another chat planned. So if anyone else is wondering that, the answer is we do chats about every 2 months. Try to fit one in with our EcoAthletes champions. So Bridget, feel free to reach out to us and learn more about how to join those community chats.
Yep.
We'll also share on social media of any kind of public events that we're having where, like we mentioned, the thought leadership element, that athletes are sharing their stories directly on public forums like conferences or panels. Thank you.
I also want to thank Kristen, who has done a phenomenal job in building of EcoAthletes over the past year and more, and also members of our team who have helped us as well. Michael Warner, Silas, and also a couple who couldn't be here. But we have a great team that's making all of this happen, who make all of this happen. And thank you to the champions and for building this movement.
While we're thanking everybody, I think Lou deserves a thank you too for bringing his vision to reality. It's definitely an exciting day to celebrate, using Earth Day as the example to celebrate, but also recognizing that EcoAthletes just turned a year old a few weeks ago. And I think, Lou, you came to me with this idea a little more than a year ago, this vision, and it's been really exciting to see you turn it into this great community here. So thank you.
It's inspiring to be a part of it. And also remember those climate action commitments, champions and champions in waiting. Commitments and then acting on them. And we can do this. So thank you so much. And have a great Earth Day.